There are many amazing game franchises out there, but there are some that just remain embedded in your psyche forever. In my case, the one that really stands out is none other than the legendary Aliens vs Predator. Technically, the first game in the franchise was 1993's beat-em-up called Alien vs Predator, which was released for the SNES, but I'm talking specifically about the FPS titles here. So forgive me if I glance over certain releases such as the noteworthy Aliens vs Predator Extinction from 2003, or any of the games based on the very questionable movies. Oh, and yes, I'm outright ignoring any releases on mobile devices. Anyway, I actually borrowed the first AVP game from one of my friends in the 6th grade. I remember him telling me about aliens, but was fascinated by the idea of a monster that could turn invisible, hurt itself to heal, and hunted other species for sport. The thing is, I had a surface level knowledge of aliens but knew absolutely nothing about predators, so 1999's Aliens vs Predator was my first real exposure to these iconic creatures. And what a game it was, and still is. My PC back then only just managed to run the game, and from the get-go I knew I was in for something truly unforgettable. For me, playing as an alien was probably the most fun. There were very few times where I didn't feel totally overpowered. Being able to climb through vents and bite the heads off of Marines and civilians was just absolutely insane. The Predator was quite a learning curve. Traversal was odd, learning how to use the plasma caster and invisibility definitely wasn't easy, and avoiding Marines with miniguns was of paramount importance. But in all truth, the most unforgivingly brutal species to play as in Aliens vs Predator was a human, or more specifically, a colonial Marine. I have arguably never felt more impotent and terrified in an FPS game than taking on the role of a grunt in the original AVP. The thing about Aliens vs Predator is that it is dark, and I mean verging on pitch black at the best of times. As a Marine, you could either opt to use flares to light your way, which really wasn't very useful and certainly not sustainable given their limited supply, and rely on your motion tracker, which mostly just induces anxiety if I'm honest, or you could use your night vision, which is inevitably what you were forced to do. Now, while this did make things more visible, the problem is that with all the noise and distortion it brought with it, the improvement was only marginal at best, and everything was palled in a bleak, monochromatic green. But the real horror started when I encountered my first xenomorph. I recall seeing something drop down from a vent far off in the distance, and in a flash, the thing was on top of me, screeching and spitting, baying for my blood. Letting out a yelp and in a blind panic, I let loose a hail of pulse rifle rounds, successfully managing to dismember and kill my attacker. However, not realizing that aliens have concentrated acid for blood, I was melted to death in a matter of seconds. Even at the age of 12, I concluded that this was an entirely realistic depiction of how things would have gone in real life, except I probably would have had heart failure if I had to face an actual xenomorph, even if I was fully armed and armor-clad. AVP as an alien is pretty easy, as a predator challenging, but as a human absolutely horrifying and traumatizing on every level. Whoever designed the human campaign truly was a sadist, but regardless of whether you played as a colonial marine or predator, the one sound you absolutely hated to hear, especially in a dark room or hallway, was the scuttling of a friggin' facehugger. Not only do these things insta-kill you if they manage to successfully pounce and attach to your face, but they emit an ear-shattering shriek which, if you happen to be wearing headphones at the time, would make you jump out of your chair or fling your headset across your room. Every single time this happened, I was not prepared at all, and every single time, my heart wouldn't stop beating in my throat for a good 10 or more minutes. I consider the first Aliens vs Predator a full-on sci-fi horror game. With its dimly lit, expansive environments, brilliant sound design, and engaging FPS gameplay, it's a game that just kept on giving. Replaying levels always brought about a sense of excitement, and unlocking cheats and playing levels with these enabled was actually a ton of fun. A lot of publications at the time awarded Aliens vs Predator moderate to good scores, but I honestly believe the first game to be a masterpiece in its own right. I could go on and on about it, but since this is meant to be a brief history, let's continue onward. It came as no surprise to me when the sequel to the first game, appropriately titled Aliens vs Predator 2, released 2 years later in 2001. I can't remember how old I was when I played the sequel, but while it wasn't quite as horrific and dark as the original, it was still a significant improvement in terms of graphics and gameplay. Playing as an alien this time around felt more balanced than in the original game, but still fairly overpowered. Admittedly, my favorite campaign was as the Predator. Something about the levels and overall story arc just made the entire experience truly memorable. It was definitely challenging, but plenty of fun at the same time, and General Vasily Rykov as the campaign's primary antagonist was awesome. But the human campaign, playing as Corporal Andrew Frosty Harrison, was just narrowly behind it. In one of the levels, you're required to infiltrate a xenomorph hive to save one of your fellow Marines. Needless to say, this was utterly nerve-wracking, and later on, you're required to make an escape after having angered the entire hive. All I can tell you is that there was a lot of backpedaling and firing pulse rifle and grenade rounds and an angry swarm of bugs hell-bent on turning me into paste. I think that no matter what, playing as a human in any Aliens vs Predator game is more horror than anything else. You realize just how physiologically inferior you are to both xenomorphs and predators. Ash, the synthetic from Ridley Scott's Alien, called xenomorphs the perfect organism, and some predators are 8 feet tall killing machines with hyper-advanced tech. I want to believe my skill bore me through those challenges, but there's no doubt in my mind that even when I played well, a huge amount of luck was on my side. Aliens vs Predator 2 was very well received and even nominated for some awards, though it sadly never won any. To my mind, it should have at least gotten some kudos for best story, because the whole intertwined narratives and plot are really interesting in my opinion, something that is uncharacteristic of most FPS games. An expansion for AVP2 entitled Primal Hunt was released just shy of a year later, but in all honesty, it's nothing really to write home about. In fact, it's highly mediocre at best and pretty lazy at worst. While it adds more content to the base game in terms of weapons and multiplayer maps, it's ultimately lackluster and, as GameSpot put it, boring and repetitive, which is almost worse than just being bad given how good the base game is. It would be a full 8 or so years later until the release of 2010's graphically superior Aliens vs Predator. Interestingly, much of the same mechanics seen in both the classic AVP games are apparent here, with lightning-fast movement speed when playing as an alien, and a sense of being overpowered once again, and the often tricky traversal and combat mechanics associated with the Predator. In terms of the Colonial Marine, as some other players have mentioned, the campaign generally feels more fleshed out, and yet again, you will experience the familiar emotions of being underpowered and even ineffectual at the best of times. Is it a perfect game? No. But is it one dripping with nostalgia and a game that just about everybody who's played it absolutely loves? Indeed. I'm not entirely certain what it is that makes Aliens vs Predator so enduring, but I think the interplay between the three warring factions, as well as their unique traits and adaptations, play a major part. The thing is, while each species has its own strengths and weaknesses, it's very apparent in every single title that humans are very much on the bottom rung, and I think it may actually be this that makes the game so singularly unique. In other FPS games, as a human, you feel pretty capable, even godlike, but in AVP, you are constantly reminded of your shortcomings and are fully aware that without the ability to collaborate with others and share firepower, you'd be dead for sure. Overall, Aliens vs Predator has a rating of 90% on Steam, but a 68 rating on Metacritic and a score of 7.4 from users. It looks like a lot of outlets and players at the time were unimpressed with this title, with some players saying the alien was basically ruined here. It also looks like the multiplayer, which for all intents and purposes is now dead, was also a sore point back then. As a fan of Aliens vs Predator, I am almost certainly biased in my appraisal, but it seems to me that many reviews at the time were just a little bit too harsh. For whatever reason though, in 2023, Aliens vs Predator holds a very high score and seems like a game that is still well worth playing even today. But the real question that I'm sure is burning in all of our minds is, when are we getting another Aliens vs Predator? It's been 13 years for crying out loud. Rebellion, the developers behind the first AVP and 2010's AVP, are still around but don't seem to have anything in the pipeline. Then there's Monolith, who developed AVP 2, but their next upcoming game is Wonder Woman. No sign of anything Aliens vs Predator in sight. Could the lukewarm reception 2010's AVP initially received be part of the reason? I definitely hope not, but it very well may have something to do with it. So is there any hope for the franchise? Of course. The recent success of 2022's Prey from director Dan Trachtenberg, as well as the acclaim Aliens Dark Descent has received, bode well for the franchise and almost certainly means more movies and games are in the works. However, whether any of these will be a new Aliens vs Predator game remains to be seen. We're definitely overdue for a new game, and with all the advancements in game development over the past decade, we absolutely deserve a new game. While I wouldn't get my hopes up immediately, it's my greatest wish that a new AVP game is announced within the next few months. There's no way this franchise will die, so if you ask me, it's all just a matter of time. And that's pretty much all I have to say for today, friends. Have you played any of the Aliens vs Predator games? If so, what are your thoughts? And do you think we'll ever get a new title? Let us know in the comments. Be sure to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel for daily gaming, VR, and tech content. From me and the crew here at Metasquad, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Later!